I met Vidit Aatrey, co-founder and CEO of Meesho, on 14th February. We met at Spacebot Studios in Indiranagar. Vidit is tall, lean, and clean-shaven, which is a rarity these days. He's a careful listener and measured speaker. When you ask him a question, you get the sense he's spending time parsing all its meanings and then playing out a few versions of responses in his head, perhaps even doing a little bit of editing before replying. Of course, all of this happens in a few seconds. So it's easy to miss that unless you are, well, having a conversation with him for over 2 hours. That's enough time for both of us to pick and read cues from each other. Think about it. Can you spend 2 hours in a room having a truly open ended, candid, and widespread discussion with another person about their life, their business, their colleagues, their company and its culture, and even their family without getting to really know them? I'd been wanting to have Vidit as a guest on First Principles for a while, even during our first 2 seasons. But as it turns out, things clicked only in 2025. I'm glad though, because I do feel Vidit's and Meesho's journeys are a wonderful opening to season 3 of First Principles. There's a lot of good stuff we talked about. Why Vidit is so eager for Meesho to build for a long term view. Why he values problems way more than solutions. The humility and willingness to be led to new places by customer insights. The much talked about zero commission model and building products for users who aren't in the top 5% of India. Let's get started with the conversation, shall we? Vidit, you don't have a family history of entrepreneurship. You come from a family of farmers. You're the first engineer. Your father always, from our research, your father always used to tell you to study hard, and he told you that there are two types of jobs. One is either a government job, or the other one is to work in a kirana store. And of course, like you went to IIT, then you went to ITC was your first job, and in Mobi, right? Uh, I'm trying to understand what are the sources for, like, how did your childhood in influence the kind of person that you are today, the kind of founder that you are today? One part is very clear because the market that you decided to go after, right? You spoke earlier about how you and Sanjeev zeroed in on that because it was what you were able to relate to. But other than that, how has your childhood influenced you?
Yeah, I think my childhood has influenced me in many ways. I think middle class values, I feel, generally help you in the long term, especially in work ethic. As I said, I think my parents were about
I
like,
come from a
hey,
middle class background, but I'm still going to ask you to explain what does it mean. What do you mean by middle class values help you?
yeah, I think middle class values is about like being humble. It's about like working hard. That's the only way out, right? So as you said, like my dad told me, you have to study. That's the only way out. Otherwise, you'll have to go and sit in a shop somewhere close by. And I used to believe that for a very long time. So I thought like for a long time I studied just because I didn't want to sit in that shop that my dad used to refer to. So I think it just, I would say like humility as well as work ethic, both a strong work ethic comes from middle class values. To me, I think that's what comes from my background. Entrepreneurship, as you said, my family or people around me were not entrepreneurs. So I don't think I ever imagined myself to be an entrepreneur when I was growing up, ever. I always thought that I will go and do a job somewhere after studying because that's what I saw around me. I think entrepreneurship happened because I would say when I went to college, I saw people like me starting up. And I think that made a big impression in my head that I can also do it. If people like me who studied in the same college, same hostel, same department can do it, why can't we do it? I think it's the same for Sanjeev. He also does not come from a family of entrepreneurs, but both of us just saw other people around us do it, which made it more real. And I think that makes a big difference. It just builds confidence. I felt the same thing when I came to InMobi here. Like these were people like me who built this business just few years before me, then why can't we? When I went to college, seeing the story of Flipkart, Sachin and Vinny starting Flipkart, Zomato, all of these people came from IT Delhi. That's where I started. So I think that built the confidence that you can do it and it's okay to do it. And I think we were just also very young when we started up. I was 24 when we started up. So you don't think too much. You're saying, hey, these are people like me. They can do it. We should also try. And if it doesn't work, we can always go back to a job. So yeah.
Let's cut to the present. Do you think that same attitude exists today? I'm sure you have a lot of folks in your company who are around that same age, etc., and stuff like that. So let me split that question into two parts, right? First, let's talk about middle class values. You're a parent to a 8-month-old daughter. She'll turn 9 months old, is what you told me earlier. She's not going to grow up as a middle class kid. A lot of your employees, who've joined in the last 5-10 years, may not have come from what your definition of middle class background was. Now, it's another matter that everybody in India thinks that they are middle class, right? But even though they are not. What does that do then to those values? Like, how do you think as a parent, as a founder, to what values are required to really become successful and driven over the long term?
No, the point of how will I give the same values to my daughter is something that I think about all the time.
And I don't have time. She's only 8 months old.
Yes, so I'm gonna figure out. I just hope a lot of that will also come by just she observing me, right? Like whatever you do, right? Like your action always speak a lot more louder than words. So I'll tell her whatever.
Trust me, as a parent, that's like literally the thing that you have to always watch out for, because parents will say one thing and do another thing, and kids are incredible at picking up the differences between the two.
Correct. So I'm just hoping that will do. And these two values which I care about, which is humility, always remembering your roots, where you came from, and that I still remember today. And the second is like there's no way out except for strong work ethic, right? Like the day you feel you can chill out a bit, I feel generally is the peak of where you are. So I think to me, I don't know how will I be able to implement the same thing or like teach her these values, because you're right, the context is very different. She did not grow up in the same way that I grew up. If you look at Meesho employees, I would say a lot of them come from middle class, because people who join Meesho also join it for the mission that I talked about. So the same way Sanjeev and I connect with our mission.
Is that an implicit or explicit bias?
Implicit. Like we don't have an explicit bias, but most people, by the way, it always happens by, like it's the natural selection over time. People who join and stay longer are the people who find a lot of meaning
and
in their work.
Affinity to that cause.
Correct. And as I said, like our culture also forces you to be on the ground a lot, speak to these customers a lot. So if you don't enjoy that for a long time period.
Interesting. If I can just explain that, what you're essentially saying is that there are two filters. There is an attraction filter, and then there is a repulsion filter. The attraction filter is, let's say 100 people apply to Meesho. Chances are a large number of those people actually are okay or like the business that you're in, right?
Correct.
And then there is a repulsion filter, which is after you've come in, and if you find that within the company there's a certain kind of work ethics, expectations of you, it will automatically filter out those who don't like it. So therefore, those that remain after passing through these two filters are in some senses implicitly aligned with the mission of Meesho and its overall ethos, etc. I've seen that.
I'll give you one example of this. So whenever someone joins Meesho, they go through what we call a DICE visit. So DICE is our mission, which is democratize internet commerce for everyone. So what happens as part of DICE visit, everyone goes and stays with one small business for a few days in their shop. So 3 days, everyone, irrespective of which team you are in. 3-4 days you stay in that shop, and the goal is you spend 1 or 2 days finding some problem for that business and then solve it in the remaining 2 days. And a lot of people who join us directly from their campus, then they go and stay at a shop. It's like working for a shopkeeper. And then they come back. And by the way, you should see how they feel when they come back. They said, like, the things they discover, how that shopkeeper is, what kind of problem that person faces all day around managing cash, growing that business, everything. You see, there's some people who just light up and say, I want to work for this person, which is what you're doing when you're part of the business, right? Like you're trying to work for that, grow their business. And some people who just find it too tough, like going to a small town, spending so many days at a shop of a small business and helping them out doesn't connect with everyone, right? Like a lot of businesses out there are for tier one consumers, like quick commerce, etc. And they will connect more with that. So I feel like some of these things that we do, these rituals as part of our culture, over time just self-selects people who really care about our customer.
Got it. What are some of the other, any other rituals that come to mind which are unique to Meesho?
So as part of every project, whenever people create a document, so we don't have slides in our company, it's written documents, people always have to go and speak to the customer. And most people now do it by going on the ground, not on the phone, because it's never the same. So that ritual also, by the way, keeps everyone close to the customer all the time. Every project, you can't basically publish a document around what you're doing unless you have gone and spoken to that customer to understand the problem very deep. I think that also, as part of a culture, does that self-selection quite a lot. Like people who have to do this every month, every week, if you don't enjoy it, I'm telling you, you will not stay in the organization. People who end up staying in the organization are the people who come back every time and they feel so good that, hey, I'm part of this company who's helping this seller out or this consumer out. People tell me all the stories all the time.
Got it. Speaking of people, I'm sure one of the most important jobs you do is finding and hiring talented people for Meesho. If I were to ask you, what are some of the open-ended questions that you ask people in conversations or interviews before hiring them that help you understand their thinking or their approach?
Yes, so now I mostly hire senior people, like middle management and senior. I think for senior people, the thing that I care the most about is one of our mantras, which is called growth mindset. So what I've seen is, as people age, as they have more experience, obviously they have the wisdom and the experience, but they just keep going down and down in growth mindset. They believe that they know everything that they have to know about this job.
So can I ask you to define the growth mindset?
Is like just willingness to get feedback, sometimes knowing that you don't know something, right? Like many times people don't know that they don't know. That's, I think, is the biggest problem I have seen with senior folks.
So what question will you ask that helps you unlock this?
There, by the way, many types of questions I ask. Sometimes I ask a question around, I will go and ask them, tell me the most recent failure you had, a professional failure, and what did you learn from it? A lot of people are just taken aback. And you realize junior people are generally open to sharing their failures. Senior people don't want to because they feel like, hey, I will project my weakness. So people who have, you can just see on their face. Sometimes it's not just the answer, but seeing on their face, are they very uncomfortable sharing their failure? People who are very uncomfortable sharing their failure are generally people who have lower growth mindset. There are people who are very objective about this, that, hey, I failed at this and I learned something. Some people share a fake failure, right?
We all know that.
Yeah,
the classic.
All of us know that. Something that's a big way for me to figure out. And to me, by the way, when I hire senior people, this is the thing that I care the most about. If I feel their growth mindset is weak, irrespective of they have the best resume, best experience, everything else is great, we don't hire them. Because the agility and the flexibility we were talking about earlier that we need in our business, for that you need growth mindset. You have to say you don't know what you don't know. The problems we'll solve in the future, we need to be curious all the time. We can't say I know what works and doesn't work, which is what a lot of senior people feel, that, hey, I know this doesn't work, or hey, I know this works. Innovation is about just being curious all the time.
So what you're saying also aligns to a lot of what is usually called first principles thinking, right? That don't assume something cannot be done just because it couldn't be done in the past. Maybe it couldn't be done 3 times in the past because each of those 3 times the contexts were different. But on the 4th time, it might succeed. But you'll never know if you won't try.
So I'll tell you the reason it's not the same, because a lot of people think they know first principles. And I'm saying sometimes saying I don't know all the first principles is also needed. Right?
Or that there are no first principles. The first principle is that there is no principle.
Correct.
Right?
Because
You
they are
start from
discovered.
scratch.
Right? Like first principles are also discovered again and again.
Yes.
There are a lot of people who said, hey, you can't build a large e-commerce business on WhatsApp. Right? Like, hey, you can never. I'll tell you the first principle people used to say, I have seen the P&L. There's no way you can make money by selling product to a customer whose income is so low. I mean, all of these things are assumptions that people start to believe over time, and they're just so rigid about it that they can't change it. So I'm saying knowing that you also don't know all the first principles is also part of growth mindset. So it's also, that's why it's not the same. Because you will see a lot of senior people, they talk about first principle themselves quite a lot. Because they have understood.
It's also fashionable these days to talk about mental models.
Yes.
If I may say so myself.
But again, you don't know many mental models. Right? And many mental models also have edge cases. So I think that's many times when new companies that come and disrupt, they bring a new first principle. They create a new mental mindset. Right? Like there was no concept of network effects before a lot of these social networks came in. So that mental model was invented after that business came. But if you miss that wave, hardly there were newer companies to be built in that space after that. So a lot of things make sense in hindsight, but it's all about figuring out and being okay to say, I don't know everything. So to me, I think that's the most important piece with hiring seniors. That's where I spend time.
Talking about what we know and what we don't know, how do you apply that to yourself while at work and as a founder and CEO? How often do you say, I don't know? And then when you say, what do you do next? Do you ask for help? Who do you go to for help? Do you go to peers? Do you have a coach? What's your process to stay honest to these principles that you talk about?
It's very tough actually. And that's why I'm saying it's very tough because you have seen many things and you like it, you don't like, you do pattern matching all the time. So I've seen many times we have failed, and the next time I see something like this, I feel like saying, hey, it won't work. And then I have to consciously think about, don't say it, right? So I think what I have done over time is I have tried to bring more checks and balances on myself, making less decisions individually myself. I've tried to kind of distribute these decisions. How our org structure is, over time, I have tried to kind of let go of these decisions. Many times people are making decisions that intuitively I feel this won't work, but I let people do it. Because I remind myself, I don't know everything, right? But it's hard. To be honest all the time, that when I will make a decision and I'm not putting my biases into it, I'm sure that that's untrue. Which is why I try not to make a lot of these decisions. And when people come with ideas and I feel like it's a stupid idea, I'll still fund it and say, why don't you go and try it? Because maybe it'll work the next time. So I think it's hard. And I myself see it.
How do you balance that? How do you, as CEO, tell them about, there's obviously something that you know about that it didn't work. If it didn't work, it's a reality and it didn't work for certain reasons, right? And that information may be useful to that person because not knowing it is also not good. At the same time, you don't want to tell them, don't do it, right? So you're walking this fine line between, let me tell you why it didn't work the last time, but let me also tell you that you should go. And knowing that, because you're saying this as CEO, that person is reading between the lines and thinking, is Vidit telling me it didn't work the first time as some kind of coded signal to say, don't do it this time? How do you walk that?
It's true. That, or by the way, like people also get influenced a lot by me, right? They feel like this person has good judgment. That's why the company is reached where it is. So if he's saying it hasn't worked in the past, maybe it doesn't work. And which is why I'm saying many times when I see and I feel it won't work, I don't say anything and let people do it. There are many things in a company that are built, new ideas that are getting funded, that by the way, if you ask me, I don't believe they will work, but I let them be. I'm saying just because you have to try lots of new things. And to be very frank, there have been many ideas that I thought won't work that have really worked.
I'm sure those were the ones that must be giving you the most joy, right?
Correct.
There's
Absolutely.
this joy of
because
being
then I learned
proved
something
wrong.
new.
Exactly,
Yes.
right? That you thought something wouldn't work, someone proved you wrong, and someone proved you wrong in your own company is the best kind of joy that I suppose a founder can get.
Absolutely. So over time, that's what I've been trying to do, reminding myself to stay curious, reminding myself, hey, my first thing that comes to my head about this particular decision is this. Why? Because I have some bias from the past. Just knowing it all the time is very important. Because as I said, like the more time you spend in a particular space, you become very opinionated. I'm very opinionated. But I have to make sure that I don't crush all the new ideas because of my opinions that could be dated. Like a lot of my opinions have been built in eras that are not relevant anymore. Like a lot of stuff was done on
Just
WhatsApp.
for context, you're a 10-year-old company. So when you refer to eras, you're referring to your company as maybe 2 to 3 year eras.
Correct.
4 to 5 times. But
Like
I mean,
pre-pandemic, what customer behavior was.
Fair.
And now it's very different. But if I remember
or
all the failed
pre-Geo era and
experiments.
post-Geo era and
Correct.
WhatsApp era and influencer short video era. I'm sure
Absolutely.
all of
Absolutely. So I'm saying all of these things, if I keep a lot of these strong mental models, we won't be able to try lots of things because we'll be reminded, hey, we tried this in 2018, didn't work.
Got it.
But we keep trying new stuff. So I think it's for me also, just not making all the decisions yourself is very important. You have to let people do it. And even when you don't agree with all of them, let it pass and let people prove you wrong. And as you said, I get the most amount of delight when people prove me wrong.
Got it. All right. What truly drives you as a person? What makes you get up every day? What gives you energy? What keeps you going?
I think what keeps me going is number one, and I think which is the most important, is what we are working on. I think to me, there's a lot of meaning in the mission statement we have. And whenever I'm feeling not the best about something, I go and basically spend some time on the ground, or I will go and read some of these, we call it LODs, which is what people have discovered, user insights, how people
Sorry,
are
what's
finding.
LOD?
LOD means listen or die. So it's
Got
like like you have to keep listening to your customers, otherwise you die. So I think when I go and read LODs, some of these impact stories, that gives me a lot of positive energy. So one is I find a lot of meaning in the mission that we're working towards, which is why we're also not like gone astray, right? Like we have stayed very focused on it because that matters to me a lot. Second, what drives me a lot is, by the way, like to me, and again, it's hard to pinpoint where it comes from, but I find a lot of positive energy from solving hard problems. Like you take a hard problem, you go deep, and after a week or a month, you solve it. And when it gets solved, that gives me a very unique form of a high. Or when I go and discover an insight that no one else has found before, that gives me, that eureka moment gives me a lot of insight. I think that just basically is the builder's high, right? Like you are the one who are doing this.
How do you get that as CEO? And like now that you're 10 years old and you're operating at this scale, the opportunities for you to get builders high must be fewer. I mean, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because now you're running this giant ship. You have your direct reports, you have all these critical meetings, you have investor presentations, you're figuring out all of these things. So the scope for you to directly work on problems and solve them, hasn't that gone down?
Actually, it hasn't.
Like, what's your work week like in a typical work week?
I think last 5 years, things have become better. So 10 years ago, obviously, we were doing everything.
Right.
Then over time, a lot of culture, the team became larger, culture responsibility, and I did not have enough senior leaders, I would say. So it went down because I was doing a lot. Over the last 5 years, I've got a lot of good -1s who have taken off this responsibility from me. So I don't have to spend so much time with investor relations.
Got it.
Or spend so much time with people.
Operations.
Yes. Or like looking at are things breaking on a daily basis,
Got it.
firefighting, where you spend a lot of time, where I was spending time like 5 years ago. So now actually, I would say 50% of my time actually is going in like being deep into problems.
Got it. So your typical work week would look like what?
Like my first Monday is generally goes, it's like the weekly business review equivalent. So half day is just looking at what happened last week with all my direct leaders. And then the second half of the day goes in mostly one-on-ones with either my direct reports or skips, whoever wants to like spend time with me because they need some help. The remaining 4 days, by the way, is very unstructured.
So it's not pre-calendared at the beginning of the week.
Yes. So basically it's like where I want to spend time, whichever problem I want to spend time, I will basically put it on the calendar. Wherever team wants to get my time, they will put it on my calendar. Or depending on when I'm hiring a lot or not hiring a lot, it keeps changing, but it's very flexible. The remaining 4 days, it's not very rigid that this is what will happen on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But I actually now get a lot of time neck deep into these problems. We again have short meetings, but every meeting has a document. So half of the time is basically going and reading documents.
Is this the Amazon style document where there's like a 3-pager or a 2-pager?
Yes.
And people read it?
People read, put questions beforehand, and we have very short meetings where we just discuss points of discussion that have come in, feedback or questions.
How long are these meetings?
Like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, stuff like that. So not very long. But you have to spend enough time reading these documents because no one is presenting. As soon as you go, you start the discussion. The good thing, as I said, is now I get to do a lot of this, and mostly I spend time in problems in some of the newer stuff we are starting, either newer businesses or newer platforms we are building.
I'm assuming that we talked about influencer-based sales,
influencers, Valmo, some of the newer categories we are starting, which are very different.
So looking beyond the horizon at things that others may not have the time and space to do is one of the things that you are able to do.
Correct.
Now.
So internally, that's what we call it like H1 and H2. H1 is horizon 1, our current horizon, and H2 is over the horizon, which is horizon 2. So like most of my time goes in H2. And that I enjoy. And I think that's where also organization gets the best value out of me, right? Like that's what we have done in the last 10 years, right? Like very ambiguous problems, discovering what the core insight is and building on that.
Got it. Organization gets the most value out of you when you're concentrating on H2. But you also said a lot of your reports or skip reports, etc., will schedule time with you to come and have meetings with you. What do they get most value out of you from? And I want you to answer this in 2 ways. One is, what are they usually coming to you for help? And 2, where do you feel you're strongest placed to provide them with help?
I think they come to me for brainstorming around decisions. It could be around org structure. Hey, I'm thinking about this leader taking this responsibility. What do you think? Or they'll say, hey, we discovered this insight. I'm thinking about funding a new team. What do you think? Or we are at a critical juncture of this charter. We just discovered this. It may not work. It may work. Where people are making decisions and they want a second opinion is the place where people reach out to me, mostly. Those are the things that they are discovering.
Do you enjoy that?
I do. Again, that's mostly problem solving. The thing that I don't enjoy...
go ahead.
The thing I don't enjoy is many times the people, conflicts, escalations, where people are misaligned, that you have to solve. That over time, by the way, goes away. Most of my direct reports have spent enough time in the organization. Average time of my direct reports in the organization between 4 to 5 years. So they now know each other.
50% of your organization's life, which is a fairly good number.
Yes. So they know each other. So now number of conflicts, etc., is much lower. That's not what I enjoy. But all the others are like...
You use the word brainstorming. Now, have you seen the way you've become more effective at brainstorming from the time you started Meesho to today? What's your approach to brainstorming? What sort of, like when people come to you and say, I want to brainstorm something with you, what do you tell them? This is the best way to get brainstorming help out of me.
So I think when 10 years ago, I was a very young person and I don't think I was a great systems thinker. Right? So what does that mean? I'm saying you bring me a problem, I'll give you a solution right away. Correct?
You're
Some-
violating your own principle of just not jumping to solutions.
Yeah, but because there's so many things happening.
I get it. No, because you're also a fresh founder back then, right?
Yes, so
you
I
learn.
was young, so I would believe everything can be solved with hustle,
Correct.
hard work, all of that, right? Like that's
And
the
especially
thing.
as a founder, when someone comes to you, your first tendency is, here's the answer. Or
Correct.
here's the solution.
Over time, that has changed, where I try not to give answers. I just try to give them some principles of how, if I'm in your position, how will I think about it? You brought this, the principle is not to jump into a solution, but to think about the problem. I'll say, hey, if I'm in your position, I will ask, is this a real problem of the customer? I will ask, hey, are we being really user first when we are making this decision? Are we thinking long term or not? Because I've realized, like, if you want to design a system, you create short-term value by giving them a solution. You create long-term value by coaching people of how to come to that solution themselves. Because you do that
like
once,
that classic
twice, thrice.
Analogy of teaching a person how to fish
Yes.
versus giving them fish.
Correct. So there's another way of people say, like, be a clock builder rather than telling time, right? Like I can tell them time every time, or I can tell them how to build a clock and they can look at the time themselves.
All right.
So that's the difference between being a systems thinker or just do this right now. I think that's been the biggest difference.
All right. How are you as a person different? I mean, what's your personal life? Or what are you on the... I mean, do you have weekends? Like, for example, let me not presume that now that you're a dad, I'm guessing that you're trying to claw back more personal time. But what is Vidit the person? What are your interests?
Yes. So I think before my daughter was born, I used to work on Saturdays and not work on Sundays. Now I still have to work some weekends, but try not to work on weekends because I want to spend a lot more time with my daughter. During the week, whatever I do is just not enough time. And many times I get surprised by, she can now do this, she can now do that. And I didn't see her do it for the first time.
Right, the milestones. You missed a key milestone.
Yes, like it'll happen when I'm in office, right? Like someone will just send me a video of how she's scrolling and now she's saying this particular word and all of that, right? Like, and
Right.
when you miss it and someone else does it, it's a weird feeling, but you understand, right? Like that's okay. So I get, in general, I've always been someone who gets a lot of positive energy from family. So even earlier, most of my weekends when I'm not working was spent with family. I'm not someone who will just go out and do something else. Mostly with my wife. My parents live close by. My in-laws live close by. So it's the good thing has been that family has always been close by.
So in some senses, your not interest, but your passion is bimodal. It's Meesho and family. Right?
Yes.
During the week or like 6 days, it's Meesho, and then the rest of the time it's family. In that
Mostly
sense,
family,
yeah.
right? Like I'm generally not out doing anything else, right? Like I'm mostly trying to spend time. And that was true for the last 10 years. Like since I've been married, of course, even more, but it had mostly been like this. I have certain hobbies that I enjoy that basically, again, balance stress in my life. Like, for example, I love tennis. So I play it as much as I can, maybe 3 times a week, 2 times a week. And I watch as much as I can once in a while. I like to read. I read a lot of history mostly. Mostly because I'm trying to figure out why are things how they are, and I feel like there are a lot of answers to that in history of how things have evolved. So I like to read a lot. I like to play a lot.
Do you have a book that you'd recommend that you like? I mean, from let's say history,
The many books,
or
but
something that you're reading recently, or in
But
the
I'll give
recent-
the book that I think I really enjoyed. I basically got a lot of learning that I didn't think I will get as much. There's this book called These Truths by Jill Lepore. It's a book on the history of the United States. And I sometimes tell people that book is the best startup book I've ever read. It's about like how US was a startup that
Right,
just
how the founding fathers came together.
like
It's-
very anti-tradition and anti-legacy because they were trying to get away from UK, and they said we will do everything opposite. Like the same way when you are a 24-year-old who wants to start up, will say I will not do how traditional companies have done, because that streak of being defiant, right? Like that is there. I think when I read that book, from the history to where it is today, it just felt like the best ever startup created. So I got a lot of learnings just in how to set up a culture, an organization that I think will continue to innovate over a long time period. I think there are a lot of learnings from there, but then a lot of books actually.
Got it. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with your life right now?
I'm decently happy. There's always days when I feel I didn't do enough at home, I didn't do enough at work.
But I mean, if this were a form, you can only enter a number.
Maybe 7 or 8. 7 or 8. I think some days it feels like 9, some days it feels like 6. Because I always feel like I don't think I'm able to give the right amount of time both sometimes between family and at work.
Got it.
But I think a good balance where everyone feels
Got it. All
slightly unhappy.
Is there something that you've geeked about recently, which something, a new hobby, a new product, a new service, something that you tried out, which you've been excitedly telling everyone about? Anything like that?
Geeked about. I'll tell you a book that I just read recently.
Yeah.
This book is called Impro. It's basically a book written by Keith Johnstone, I think, like 70 years ago, who was a very famous theatre professor in the UK. And it's a book on improv, right? And I was reading this book because someone recommended it to me around storytelling, right? Like, and I generally find it, again, it's a topic of my interest. So I said, let me just pick this up. And I was fascinated by that book. It was about the principles of improv. How do you become really good at improv? And number of lessons I could take from my life from that is crazy. Like the first chapter just blew my mind. It just talked about like
it must be rare.
Huh?
I mean, if you read a lot of books, it's very rare that the first chapter of a book just blows your mind. Because most of the times it's like, it's a good book.
It does not happen. The first book is around status. So the title is Status. And it talks about how being more observant around like the status difference between different people on stage makes you create that setup much, much better. You can just elevate that scene.
Now that you say it, I can see stand-up comedians constantly using it when they pick people up or refer to people, etc. Interesting. Correct. This book sounds fascinating. I'll definitely buy.
So it's basically, again, there's something I geeked out about. Like I thought, someone told me, I'm saying improv, storytelling. First of all, can't see the connect, but let me try it. But I was mind blown.
Got it. Where and how do you read books? Physical books or Kindle?
I think it's a mix of both. When I travel, I take a Kindle because it's hard to kind of take books around. But when I read at home, I generally read it from a book.
What's your reading time like? Like, I mean, when do you find the time to read?
On a daily basis, I read before I sleep. So I will read for like 45 minutes in my bed.
Oh, that's fascinating. You've consistently managed to kind of keep that habit?
Yes, it also helps me wind down after work. So it helps me sleep well as I read something every day. Otherwise, my reading time now has become quite volatile. I think before my daughter Ira was born, I used to read a lot on the weekends. Now it happens here and there. When she's sleeping, I read. Then she gets up and that does not happen. So it's not very consistent on the weekends anymore, but like 45 minutes per day in the evening.
All right. I think we'll end on that impro book recommendation from you for our listeners. Thank you. I'm going to pick up a copy as well. Thank you so much for your time and wonderful conversation with it. It was a pleasure having you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the first episode from season 3 of First Principles. This episode was produced by Hari Krishna. Mixing and mastering for the episode was done by the wonderful Rajiv CN, our resident sound engineer. And before you check out, if you've been a long-time listener of the podcast and are glad we're back, do tell the world that by sharing this episode with everyone you think will find it valuable. Okay, this is me, Rohin Dharmakumar, signing off. We'll be back soon with another episode.